Welcome to the Thank You Life podcast. In this episode, Kevin Canella sits down with Alli Waddell, the co-owner and co-founder of Illumma, a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy clinic in Austin, Texas. Alli shares about how challenging it is to try to run a successful ketamine-assisted psychotherapy practice where the priority is top-level care. And she and Kevin get into all the ins and outs of the industry and why that's so challenging, what they're seeing in the space, and ultimately the need for a model, a successful model of how to do this. Because even when psilocybin and MDMA are inevitably pushed through in a clinical setting, the model still needs to be figured out. Otherwise, nobody will be able to afford it and nobody will be able to stay in business in this work. So in order to ensure that this type of work, this ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, this psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy can continue and flourish and reach as many people in need as possible, then the need for a model is evident. And Alli shares a lot of insights about things that she's seen and how we can potentially move forward, what needs to change, and really a call to arms for everybody who cares about this movement. So this conversation definitely sheds a lot of light on the challenges of being a psychedelic therapy practitioner in 2024, 2025. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to reach out and see how you can support Thank You Life and our providers, visit our website, thankyoulife.org.
Thank You Life is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was started by myself and Dr. Dan Engel in 2022 as a financial assistance fund for psychedelic therapy. Psychedelic therapy is expensive, and 95% of the U.S. population cannot afford its costs. That's where we come in. We partner with over 100 ketamine clinics throughout the U.S. to help clients who cannot afford this treatment. In 2024 alone, we gave over $250,000 away to help 115 people receive this life-changing treatment. This work is not cheap, and it is life-changing. If you feel inspired to give or to become a monthly donor to help more individuals access this treatment, please visit thankyoulife.org/donate or email our Director of Philanthropy, Meredith Thomas, at meredith@thankyoulife.org. Every bit counts, and small monthly donations are especially important to keep this work moving forward. If you can give even $10 to $25 a month, you will join our community of contributors who are changing the lives of so many. Thank you all for your support.
This episode of the Thank You Life podcast is proudly supported by Enthea, a mental health company dedicated to providing access to safe and affordable psychedelic-assisted therapy. Like us at Thank You Life, Enthea is committed to removing health equity obstacles that impede access to impactful mental health care. Enthea is a third-party administrator specializing in innovative mental health benefits for employers, including access to ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. As the first and only provider of advanced mental health solutions for the workplace, they enable companies to expand their benefits to include breakthrough therapies that address root causes of mental health challenges. Visit enthea.com to learn more. And now, back to the show.
Hi, Alli.
Hi, Kevin.
Welcome to the Thank You Life podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, this is Alli Waddell. You and your husband, Ken Aldoff, started Illumma.
Yes, we did. 6 years ago.
Which is a ketamine clinic here in Austin, Texas.
It is. It is, yes.
And yeah, thanks so much for doing this conversation.
Of course.
So, I was sharing with you how the real intention of this podcast is to dive into people's stories of healing. And I think you said something like you certainly have your own.
I do.
Yeah, I'm curious what a good place to start might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I had two parents that were doing their best, but however I came out as the soul on this planet probably weren't the best fit for me at times in my life. And so that showed up in a number of different ways. I started using food as a coping mechanism super early. Like I remember in elementary school, coping with not knowing that that's what I was doing, but feeling bad and wanting things. And I also have my parents are a very strong dichotomy. So my mom is a scientist and very rigid and very type A and pretty controlled with her household and like only wheat bread, no snack food, very much like that. And then my dad is actually an artist and but has been a woodworker my entire life. And he's just kind of a wild guy. Has been diagnosed and not diagnosed as bipolar multiple times in my life, has not been on meds, was an active drug addict, was an active drug user when I was very little, has smoked weed my entire life. You know, so just this kind of and so then if I was with my dad, it would be, we're stopping at 7-Eleven and getting a Slurpee and eating candy. Like, so it was just this, like, my little nervous system, like, had no idea of, like, what is right and what is wrong. And so I remember that as a very young child, as, like, not, and having a lot of big feelings, but my role in our foursome, I have a half sister who I've had my entire life, and my mom and my dad, is I was the happy one. So everybody else had a lot of struggles and a lot of big feelings. And my role was to be good and happy and joyful and bring lightness and spark to the family unit. And
which is interesting. It's like, it's a beautiful role to have.
It is.
But
as my Enneagram 7 just nailed it. You know, which came first, really. Yeah, no, it's beautiful until, just like all of our coping mechanisms, they're amazing until they become the noose around our neck that then drags us to the bottom of the ocean. I mean, everything is, your body and nervous system did exactly what it needed for you to survive up until the point of if it no longer works.
Totally.
And there are beautiful pieces of that are still parts of me. But what I learned in that system was negative emotions are not to be felt, seen, touched, communicated, that really nobody really wants you around unless you're happy.
Right. Yeah, the underbelly of that role. Yeah, and I mean, my thought was like, that's a beautiful role to play, but if you're stuck in that role and then that's the only thing that is getting affirmed, or like what we would say, like the only thing that becomes, I think the term is idiosyncratic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Where, and then, I'm forgetting like the opposite term for that, but then all of the other emotions, your ego disassociates from.
And my key coping mechanism is disassociation. I started so young that I don't even know, like, I can't even remember when I ever, so like, never being in my body, never being present, really, always being distracted or trying to distract myself. And so my parents also are both workaholics. So I was very typical 90s kid. I was alone all the time. Like, I started getting myself up and taking myself to school when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. Wow. And rode my bike a mile to school with my neighbors who were around my, like, also tons of freedom in that, tons of adventure, tons of social interact, like so many positives, but also just this, my parents raised hyper independent children. And so again, lots of success comes out of hyper independence, but it also came out of never ask for help, never tell anybody that anything's wrong with you, like hide, suppress, and so, through that, then what are the coping mechanisms of dissociation? Drugs, drinking, and sex. And all of that started very early in food. And those started very early in my life. So I started drinking when I was in 6th or 7th grade.
Oof.
It was
Where were you?
In North Austin, in Anderson Mill.
Wow.
And it was just like, it was so normalized. Like, in my group of friends, in our neighborhood, like, people's parents were partying, we're stealing alcohol, luckily never liked cigarettes, so I didn't ever get into that. But I mean, I was in FFA, I raised pigs. That was also this very big drinking kind of culture in Texas of, like,
what's FFA?
Future Farmers of America. I was on a float. I had a pig at the Houston Livestock Show. Nice. I did sell it for $13,000. It paid for my first year of college. Wow. It's a very Texas thing. But
we had some of that going on in Maryland. I grew up in Maryland, and there was some people from my middle school who were like doing 4-H. That kind of thing. 4-H and FFA are kind of it's a scholarship program for people in agriculture. Okay. And
awesome, but it was very much drinking centric. Like it was just a very interesting, just kind of farm country kids, like
Sure.
driving out to a land and a ranch and a bonfire,
Drinking in the woods or in
drinking
a field.
in the woods in a field. I mean, why not? You're drinking Coors Light down in Coors Light in 8th grade. I mean, what is happening? I look back on it and I'm like, what was going on there?
Yeah.
But so it was just this interesting, I always wanted to be older. I never wanted to be my age. I was super, super nerdy when I was young and in middle school. It was never cool. I always was on the fringe. And then I got into 9th grade and grew to 5'9" and was beautiful and didn't know I was beautiful, but then started getting attention from men. And then this whole other part of my personality came out. And so it really was this kind of whack-a-mole of how to kind of escape my reality. And then when I was in 8th grade, my parents got divorced when I was in 5th grade. And then in 8th grade, my mom took a job in New Jersey. And I was supposed to go with her. The plan was that I was going to go with her. My sister was going to college and I was going into high school. And my mom was going to take me to New Jersey. And the story's different depending on if you talk to my mom or my father and my shared experience. And I decided I didn't want to go. And so at the very last minute, I ended up moving in with my father by myself at 13.
Wow.
And my dad actually rented out his house and moved into an apartment across the street from my high school, so I didn't have to switch schools. And then it was just me and my dad, and my mom left. And that was very traumatizing on a million different levels. And
I imagine either way,
it's no good.
You're forced just with choosing one, and either way you're going to kind of lose the other.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation to put a kid in. My mom's story is that my dad manipulated me into staying. And my dad's story is, I didn't want you to leave. So I was going to do everything in my power to have you stay. And if that meant getting rid of my house and moving so you didn't, and trying to create this home so that you felt, he goes, I was going to do whatever. And me and my dad were very much closer than me and my mom is the other thing. It's like me and my dad have always been very close. We're very similar. And when my parents got divorced, my mom disliked my father so much that there's a lot about my personality that has always been hard for my mom because there's a lot that she sees in me that she didn't like about my father, which is always a struggle. And in my mom's eyes, I would have been, I would say almost still today, I would have turned out better.
In your mom's eyes?
In my mom's eyes, if I would have gone.
What do you think your life would have been like?
I don't know. My mom is I do have a super science nerd part of me, like very nerdy, went to space camp, like, like super dork. And my mom is a scientist. And so I do think that probably would have been more fostered in my mom. Like I probably would have ended up maybe more studious and maybe more like kind of career success driven. Then my dad is all about kind of freedom and personal individuality. But then I ended up doing a beauty pageant. My mom was aghast that you would put your daughter, your high school daughter, on a stage in a bikini, in a swimsuit. Which I signed up for that because I wanted to dance on stage and I thought it was hilarious. And it was. And I didn't take it seriously. My mom thought it was like the worst anti-feminist thing a child could do. So I don't, it's just interesting. I
keep thinking about your husband and all this, who I have not met, but and perhaps there's no parallel here, but like, it seems like you're more of your dad, but you still married a scientist, basically.
Oh, 100. 100. I mean, Ken is an interesting blend, actually, of both of my parents in certain ways.
And
but yes,
so just for context, he's a cardiac anesthesiologist and has been for 26 years in Austin. Amazing.
And he's a weirdo whose trauma of his alcoholic father pushed him into being a type A driven, I'll prove you wrong to the end of the earth situation. Male, Enneagram 2, very interesting. And
so like helper, which is
super helper with a real strong 1 perfectionist wing.
Oof.
That is like, you better be exactly. And so he has this but he loves me because he internally is a real weirdo. And the fact that I have been able to live that kind of freedom is so enticing for him, and I pull that into our lives. And for me, I struggle more with I'm relatively structured, but he's very structured and, very reliable. And so for us, it's a beautiful balance of like, how do you
he
balance?
Pulls the scientist nerdy part or structured part.
Yeah. So that's been great. Yeah, and so then high school was
I wonder
wild.
I wonder if you had gone to New Jersey with your mom, you would have married somebody who's more like you now, and would have been the like hyper structured one.
Completely. Yeah, it's very. I mean, man, if AI can at some point, we can have magic portals to figure out the touch points where we can. Okay, if this would have happened, how different would have? I would buy that all day because
and it sounds like that moment. Would be like
turnkey.
One of the biggest ones.
Yeah,
in your
it
life.
It is a pivot point where it's like it's the sliding doors. One way could have been this, one way could have been that. But at the same, I went through a lot of struggle with my dad. Living with my father by myself was very challenging because he was not prepared to be the father of a teenager. And looking back, I'm like, he was in his mid-40s. Had basically been single party guy since my parents got divorced. He worked 70, 80 hours a week. Like, we didn't really set ourselves up for success. But he also had started doing a ton of therapy. And so I was really, when I was in 7th grade, when I was in 9th grade, I got sent to a healing adults weekend, like a therapy intensive trauma weekend from my father, to like go hang out with adult people and talk about our trauma. And I was like, what in the world? But like that, who's doing that in 1994?
How was that for you?
It was amazing. He had sent me to therapy because I literally wouldn't talk. Like, I literally stopped talking. I stopped talking to him, like, completely. I stopped talking to everybody. I was just like completely internalized. And then he sent me to therapy, and I just strong-armed the therapist for about a month, and like would sit there and just death stare at her for the whole session. Wouldn't say a word. Like, and was trying to speak but couldn't speak. Like it wasn't like I was pissed. I was so locked up. And I will say, obviously, that wasn't the greatest therapist for me at that point. If you couldn't get me to say a word, maybe we needed to do something different than stare at each other.
Play a game or something.
Do anything. Go on a walk. We could. There could have been an intervention that would have been more helpful than stare
back at you.
It was so strange. But then he had gone to this group, which I can't remember the name of the group, and he'd gone to like a week-long kind of retreat. And so then he was like, I really think this would be helpful for you.
Wow.
And it was a bunch of adults, and we sit around and.
So you were one of the only.
I was the only kid.
Yeah.
I think I was 15.
In high school.
And they were all, there was people in their 50s, and there was maybe one person in their 20s.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, how did they even let me go to that? That's also weird.
Great
and then
question.
Seeing like adult people weeping, and it was mixed. It was men and women, and people were talking about being abused, like all kinds of things. And I was like, whoa, what are we doing? And then we were listening to music and drawing, and it was trippy.
I was going to say, like, what a mind opener.
Yeah.
For a 15-year-old.
But I did really get me into being super curious about therapy, about religion, about spirituality. Like that's the thing that I was like, okay, there are tools that you can learn that can make you feel different.
So that was a kind of point for you that
at
brought
least
interest into those things.
Yeah, at least opened me to be like, okay, so you can change, because you're so fixed state. And when you're a teenager, well, you have no frontal lobe, so it's very hard to not be fixed state. But you really I deeply believe that this is who I am and this is who I will be. And there was not really anything that was going to change who that is. So, I mean, I had a lot of traumatic events when I was in high school. So the first time I ever had sex, I was raped at the rodeo. Very traumatic. And then I stayed with a guy and apologized to him that I was crying. Terrible, sad situation. And I didn't tell anybody. Nobody ever knew because I was afraid my dad would kill the guy. I think my mom would blame my dad because why was I there and what was I doing at 15 in somebody's car drinking, there was like just a lot of reasons to like hide that. And so that was
that before or after that week long?
It was after, but I didn't even say it in that. It was before. It was before. It was before that. It was before that, and I never even mentioned it in that situation because I was so ashamed about the situation. I felt normal, things. I felt like it was my fault. I put myself in a bad situation. I shouldn't have been there, and I shouldn't have been drinking, and I shouldn't have been wearing what I was wearing, and I should have known better, and a lot of just normal victim mindset stuff.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Thank You Life podcast because you're interested in hearing inspiring stories about people's personal growth, transformation, and healing with psychedelics. And that's awesome because those stories are really powerful and they deserve to be heard. But if you are anything like me, you are also interested in what's happening out in the world to make these substances, these medicines, more accessible and available to everyone. So my name is Henry Winslow, and I created a free email newsletter called Tricycle Day that helps you do just that. Every week, I send 2 issues that take about 5 minutes to read, so not a huge time commitment at all, but they'll get you caught up on what's happening in psychedelic research, policy reform, and this emerging industry that's unfolding in real time. So if that sounds like something you would like to check out, just go to tricycleday.com, and there you can enter your email and you'll be good to go. So with that said, I'm super happy to be supporting Thank You Life, and let's get back to the podcast.
This episode of the Thank You Life podcast is proudly supported by Dr. Bronner's, a brand that believes in more than just making great soap. As a dedicated corporate sponsor of Thank You Life, Dr. Bronner's is helping us break down barriers to mental health care, advancing our mission to providing life-changing access to psychedelic therapy for those in need. Together, we're making healing possible for underserved communities across the country. So next time you see that iconic bottle on the shelf, know that Dr. Bronner's isn't just providing that refreshing shower. They're also invested in improving access to mental health care for everyone. Thank you, Dr. Bronner's, for being a true partner in healing. Visit drbronner's.com to learn more. Now back to the show.
And then, me and my dad had a very tumultuous relationship, and we were either really, really close or, he was acting completely wild and we were screaming at each other, and I didn't have any guardrails, and I was getting plastered multiple days a week and showing up at home, but getting all A's in high school. I was the mascot. I was a mascot of my high school. It was the funnest thing ever, and I made all A's, and I was a great student.
What were you guys?
The Warrior. I basically, you can't do this now. I don't know if they still do this. I hope they don't do this anymore. But I basically dressed like Pocahontas. Oof. So like as a human in an Indian dress with braids, with face paint on, with a tomahawk and a little stick horse that my dad made me that I would ride around the thing. It's very cute, actually. It's completely not culturally appropriate at all.
Yeah.
But
definitely
in the 90s, it was completely normal. So not okay. I can't probably run for governor. If that picture came out, it would be bad. But Yeah, so like again, like I think kind of the overarching story of my most of my life is most people think that I was doing great.
Yeah.
Externally, I looked like I had everything together. I was beautiful, I was smart, I was fun, everybody loved me. I was very popular. You know, like I was popular and fun and it was great, and inside I was struggling to a level that nobody knew what was happening. Yeah, I started having.
What a dichotomy.
Yeah,
I wonder just what that's like. You know, and I don't know. To say like what would be like better, I don't think is the right kind of question. But yeah, it's like I think it's a very different situation if somebody's struggling and it's apparent to everyone that they're struggling, but then it's its own sort of loneliness perhaps to be like, oh, there's also this like facade that like what everybody sees is not at all what I'm actually dealing with. Or
yeah, I mean that's just I learned how to. I mean, one of my superpowers is being a chameleon and like being who everybody wants me to be. I'm really, I was very good at that.
Is that why I like you so much?
I'm less good at that now. As I've gotten older and healed, I've become very much less like that. But I mean, that turned into in college. I had a very abusive relationship. He was a psycho. That was very terrible. And then in that relationship developed a terrible eating disorder and became bulimic for 15 years. So like most of my adult life, but that goes along with that. In 15 years, not one person ever found out. Nobody ever knew. Nobody in my family knew. Nobody. I got married, lived with somebody. He never knew. Like not one person ever suspected that anything was wrong.
Wow.
And like the reconcile of that is I'm a very good liar. Like that's a deep truth that I have to that has been one of the hardest things to reckon with. I can hide and lie better than you will never know. You will never know. One of the reasons,
unless you like want somebody to know.
Unless I want you to know, you won't know. And one of the reasons Ken is the person that the universe picked for me to be with is Ken has a magical power of seeing through my bullshit and actually many times knows something's wrong before I actually have registered it's wrong.
Wow.
And will come up to me and be like, let me know when you want to talk about whatever's happening right now. Because he's so attuned. He's highly emotionally attuned because of his trauma. But it's perfect for me because I can't hide in our dynamic. And it's been the biggest freedom and gift that I found a partner that is so attuned. I came from people who are so unattuned to even be aware of me to somebody who's so hyper fixated on me that it's a gift.
And it sounds like such a kind of secure functioning sort of way to approach you too, to be like, hey, let me know when you want to talk about it, and not be like, hey, I see something. That's
something we learned though, because when we first started dating, it was a push. It was a, what's wrong? What's going on? And I would get so annoyed and be like, leave me nothing's wrong. Leave me alone. He's like, okay, nothing's wrong.
So that's what I'm like currently kind of in. I'm more in Ken's position with the relationship that I'm in. And yeah, just hearing that, I'm like, oh, I think that would land a lot better if I more took that approach of just like, let me know when you want to talk.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that took us 2 or 3 years to really and now he's very good at it where he'll just be like, I'm just noticing something. Have you noticed anything? And I've become much more attuned through my work. I do so much somatic work now that now I can tell. But I think he's picking up on body stuff. I mean, I think he's picking up on all kinds of things that because of my pattern of dissociation, I'm not even aware is happening in my body. And he's like, yeah, I can tell because of this, like your tone, like there's a tone, there's a way you're doing, you're using your phone more. Like he's like, like he's reading me.
Wait, and the thought to me is like, yeah, to someone who's attuned, it's just written all over everything we do.
Yeah.
And if we're in a society and around a lot of other people who like are not attuned or dissociated themselves, then you can just like cruise along like you did most of your life.
And I'd chosen people up until Ken that were purposely not.
Yeah. So
Like not like not cognitively,
Consciously,
consciously doing that.
yeah,
But yeah, I think until I was ready and it started doing the work of like, no, I actually do want to be seen. I want to be able to be honest. I want to be able to be transparent. And thus I need to pick somebody that's going to pull those characteristics out of me and help me heal that part that I haven't been able to do.
Level of a mirror for you instead of having it go over their head too, so you can
do whatever, hide.
Keep
it was great hiding. Yeah. You know, it was a lot easier on a certain functionality. Yeah. Internally, it was not easier. It was much, much worse. Yeah. So that was, and then psychedelics really, I mean, I found out early on in college and after in my early 20s that I loved mushrooms. Like I definitely could tell that they made me feel different. Like I liked the weirdness of the actual experience a ton. Like I really liked that part. But I also noticed like, oh, these make me feel a lot better for like a number of weeks afterward. And I'm not really sure. I feel like connected. I feel better about myself.
And so that started in college?
In my 20s. I did mushrooms for the first time probably in high school. And then did start doing them considerably more when I was in my early 20s.
And like just recreational? Or?
Yeah, just recreational. I mean, this was 2002. I didn't even know people were using them in other ways.
Totally.
In 2002.
So like with friends?
Yeah, with friends. I wasn't a real, I won't say that. I would go to like festivals, music stuff on mushrooms, but I was more like a party, like a house party with people.
And like everybody just doing mushrooms?
Them, yes.
Or y'all like people drinking and all kinds of things?
Not typically. Yeah, maybe some people drinking. I don't know how people drink and do psychedelics. I think that is the weirdest combination. Why are you putting those two things together? So even when I was young, I never really thought. I was like, well, just do that. Totally. This is so much more interesting than drinking.
Yeah, and that's how my kind of college recreational experiences were. And I'm glad it wasn't like massive party scene.
Yeah.
Where the kind of central thing was alcohol, and then some of us were like, let's do psychedelics. It was more like there might be 10 or 15 of us, but it was like, cool, we're all gonna like eat mushrooms.
Yeah.
Put some music on.
Exactly.
And get kind of weird.
Yeah, stare at the wallpaper.
Yeah.
Have you gone into the bathroom and looked at yourself in the mirror?
Exactly.
It's crazy. Exactly. But like that was so fun. I mean, like that was so fun. Or going camping with a bunch of people and doing mushrooms outside and like being outside at night and freaking yourself out because what was that? And it was all, you know. And so that's really where that, at least my love of mushrooms started. I also had the abusive guy I dated was very into the party scene, and MDMA was rampant. And so we were doing a lot of very cut, speedy, terrible MDMA. And so
and at that time period too, it was
garbage.
So cut.
Yeah, it was just meth, basically.
Yeah,
probably.
We used it a handful of times in undergrad, which for me was like 05 to 09. And I remember just like looking up ecstasy and seeing that like half of it contained 0 MDMA and basically the other half was cut with meth. Yeah. Maybe like meth 7% was pure.
Yeah. And it was, that guy was in...
Or speed, like
amphetamine, some kind of amphetamine. Exactly.
Amphetamine,
Yeah, that guy was a real special dude. And he was in tech, and he built a drug dealer a laptop, and they gave us an entire Folgers coffee can of MDMA as the payment. And so for
like press pill kind of MDMA?
I mean, it was probably 2,000 tabs of MDMA. Jesus. And so for 6 months, we would just go out and hand it out like it was candy. Like it was every person at every place we went would just get however many he wanted. And it went on for like 6 months. And then one day we were at our house. It would just been like this crazy part. There's people everywhere. It's 4 a.m. I look around. I'm like, this is not cute. We now we have a drug den in Westlake, like with just random people that we were all friends with. And I was like, all right, we're done with that. Was a weird situation. But for decades after that, I never wanted to do MDMA because in my mind, I was like, MDMA was this one thing. Now, of course, it's one of my favorite substances on the planet when you can get pure.
Yeah. And use it
ballistic and use it in the right setting. It's one of the most amazing tools that we have. The fact that we are not going to be able to access it soon legally is super bummer.
Yeah. Okay, so there was these mushroom experiences. I mean, it sounds like the ecstasy experiences were
drugs.
Just straight up,
drugs with friends.
But there was something about the mushrooms. Okay, so that was all in your 20s, and then like, was there healing from that, or where does it feel like the healing kind of came in for you?
To be honest, the healing didn't really come in until my mid-30s. Mid-late. So I got married in my early 30s, in my early 20s, got divorced when I was 30, had kind of a come to Jesus moment with myself. I'd always wanted to be a chef, got rid of my wellness practice, drove by myself across the states to Northern California and enrolled in culinary school at 30.
Wow. Little, what do you call it? Saturn return kind of moment.
Yeah. And then ended up having the hardest next 5 years of my whole life. Like really, I had not healed I hadn't even told anybody I had an eating disorder. Going to culinary school as a bulimic I will not advise, strongly advise against that. Yeah. It was a bad, and my bulimia was so cyclical. It had so much to do with what was happening in my life. And so I would go of periods where I'd be really great and things would be really managed. But I went to California and was broke, didn't have any of my people, didn't have a routine, was working all the time, going to school. And it was like every bad, like I had no coping mechanisms to kind of deal with what I had just gotten divorced. I mean, it was just this kind of real transitional point in my life, and it was a real struggle for a number of years. And then in the end of that struggle, culinary school is 2 years. At the end of that struggle, met a guy at a low point in my life, and he was different than any guy that I'd ever met before, and he was very kind and super interesting, and I felt like I had a connection with him, so I wanted to see how that played out. So I graduated and then ended up staying there. And then we'd only been dating for 2 or 3 months and I got pregnant. And I had an IUD. So big surprise.
Wow.
That shouldn't typically happen. Yeah. And I went to him, but in my love bubble in my head, and went to him and thought, well, maybe this is what's supposed to happen. I'm in my early 30s. He's in his late 30s. He's an established, maybe we can figure this out. And he said, I think that's a terrible idea. Which he was right. But the way he said it was pretty heartbreaking at the time. And I was already struggling in that kind of the reality is the pregnancy was not viable when they removed my IUD. I would not have been able to keep the baby. Like, there's a lot of things behind that, but in some interesting linking of like, I thought it could have happened and it didn't, and it felt very rejected by him. And,
sure.
And to be honest, he was just super pragmatic, and he was like, listen, we've only been together a few months. You don't have a job here. You have no family here. And he said, and if you have my baby, you will not leave the state of California. And I'm not saying that as like a threat, but as a father, I just need you to know, like, I'll fight to keep my kid. So like, you can do what you want, but understand that you're kind of setting yourself up to be unhappy. And
for a tough situation.
And all of that is true. All of that is true. In my emotional state, it was very hard to hear. Yeah. And so that just sent me kind of down this like spiraling situation. I'm in California and I'm miserable, but I'm with him and I don't know what's happening. And I kind of just had an on my knees moment at 35 and was like, and I'd had SI, passive SI, most of my life, or since middle school, high school. And I I really was like, I'm either going to kill myself or something better. I can't, whatever this is, this can't continue because I have no idea what's happening. I feel completely out of control. And, you know, as I said, me and my mom have had a distant relationship since she moved. And weirdly, she sent me a book. She'd never sent me a book ever in my life. And she sent me Brene Brown's The Gift of Imperfections because she had heard her on NPR, and it was the first time Brene had ever been on NPR. And she said, I heard about this lady, and I feel like she would speak to you. And it changed my whole life. Like, it's a weird, like, there was something in that book that was so perfectly timed for what I was going through that was like, it still to this day feels divine. Because
cut through to you in some sort of way.
Yeah, because the whole premise is stop living. Shame lives in the dark. You cannot heal secretly. That's a false, and that's what I always try to do. I'm going to fix everything without telling anybody, and then nobody will have to know that it was all fucked up and broken, and then
like then my inside will just match the outside. That
and
loves.
Everything will be fine, and nobody will even know that I'm even a crazy person.
I just used to be a crazy person, but now it's all
the same. I'm integrated perfectly. I am perfect inside and out. It's amazing.
Nobody needs to know.
Nobody needs to know. It's a complete secret. And so that was really kind of the first thing where I was like, okay, well, I need to come out and be honest. And the first thing that felt the most pressing was my eating disorder. Like, I need to just tell somebody what's happening.
So did you recognize at the time that kind of link between that, like, on your knees, come to Jesus moment with the book being sent?
Yes.
Wow, like this.
I mean, it was within 2 days. Wow. Like, I was in the gym. We had a gym that was open 24 hours, and I would go at like the 4:30 or 5 in the morning. I'd have it all to myself. And I was in the gym. Some music came on, and I laid on the ground and was weeping on my knees, just being like, I can't, please help. I can't, like, I surrender. Somebody do something. I can't do this anymore. And like within a few days, that book arrived, and my mom was like, here. I was like, here? What? Weird. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then I just read that book, and that book was all of that was like all of these things that you think are so painful and shameful and secret and that nobody will get is actually what will connect you to everyone. And as soon as you can own that, you will find a freedom that you do not understand. Oof. And I was like, that seems really scary.
Totally.
And it was terrifying. And so I went within a few days and went and told Mark. And interestingly, he was like, is that all? Because he knew something was wrong. And but he thought it was so much worse. Like, in his mind, I mean, he thought I was having an affair. He thought something terrible was happening. And he was like, is that really what all this is? And I was like, yeah. And then I found a therapist in our little town, and she was amazing and super helpful. And then interestingly, that relationship really functioned very well when I was struggling, and not as well when I had started to not struggle. You know, so I became kind of a different person and started to do a lot of work and a lot of personal growth stuff, and go and meditate and like really start to build the toolbox and journal and figure out and read and like really start to work on myself. And he was also anti-psychedelic, and I had figured out at that point that I thought that was a path that was going to help me, and he was really didn't get it, and that bothered me. And the other key thing was, and from the beginning, he knew I always wanted to move back to Texas. And he thought, and I thought, that if he built me the perfect life in Northern California, that I would be happy. And we built the perfect life, and I fucking hated it there. And I hated it, and I didn't want to be there. And so I I came back to Austin for my birthday, and 9 years ago, I came back to Austin for my birthday, and it was like the universe, like I had all these reasons why I couldn't move back to town. I don't have a place to live, and I don't have a job, and I don't know anybody, and I knew a ton of people, but like, what am I going to do? And on that week, like literally somebody offered me a job, somebody offered me a place. Like it was like the universe was like, you're telling yourself, like the universe is like, here you go. Here's everything the reason you're saying you can't do what you know you need to do.
So like, yeah, here's the path forward. Here's the next couple steps.
Yeah. And
it sounds like it was enough for you to.
Oh, I went back and broke. I mean, we were engaged. I broke off our engagement and loaded a car within 2 weeks. And my dad flew out there and drove me in my U-Haul back to Texas.
Wow.
And for him and for many friends there, it felt very sudden. And for me, it did not feel like that. And later we had a little bit of a talk, and he got it, and he was like, listen, I should have believed you. You told me at the beginning you didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
And instead of listening to you, I didn't want you to leave so bad that I thought I could convince you to stay. You know, and that didn't work. And then I came back, and I met Ken 6 months after I moved here.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, moving back to Texas was the best thing. I mean, it really was listen to what your soul is saying and follow that, and things will work out the way they're supposed to.
And yeah, they kind of have unfolded since.
Yeah, they've been unbelievable. And Ken really was he's been the catalyst for so many things in my life. But when I met him, he was in the process of getting divorced. He had started doing psychedelics because he was struggling so much in his marriage and in his job. So he was really into psychedelics when he was young and then had taken a long break and had started doing psychedelics. And then we had a very kismet meet cute at the gym. We're both big gym nerds, always have been. I had been a member at that gym before I left California. I'd been gone for 5 years. And then I'd come back to that gym, and then I'd been there, you know, every day basically. And then I was stretching, and he was on a bike, and he made eyes at me, got off the bike and walked straight at me. And I was like, what is happening here? And he walked up to me and he said, I need to know you.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, well, you're very cute. Maybe you do need to know me. And in that first talk, we talked about psychedelics. We talked about Joe Rogan. We talked about like a number of things within like 5 minutes that were like kind of not standard, especially at that time.
Sure.
You know. And then the next day I ran into him, and we sat for an hour and a half at the front of the gym and talked about what our idea of ideal relationships was. What did love mean to us? What did we see our long... Like, it was very this weird, deep, like immediately deepness.
So you just happened to see him at the gym again the next day?
Yeah. Ran into him at the gym the next day, walking in. He was like, hey, do you want to talk? And I was like, okay. But he still had never asked me out. And then the next day I ran into him again, and he said, do you want to go on a walk? And I was like, what exactly is happening here? And he was like, well, I'm in the middle of a divorce, so I don't feel comfortable taking you out because I don't want to bring you into I'd rather us just form a friendship. And I go, okay. I was like, all right, bro, we're not going to be friends. Let's just... I already picked up on that. Yeah, we ended up making out at the end of that walk, by the way.
Just like friends do.
Didn't last long. But we did have this very beautiful long courtship because we had to have kind of some space and some distance because he wasn't genuinely was concerned about, you know, he wanted to get out of that prior to starting anything. And he'd been married for 20 years, so it wasn't like a little, and he had 2 children. And but a month in, he said, hey, I got some LSD from UT, and you want to do it? And I was like, I've never done LSD. I was like, sure. And we did it. And he goes, get ready, because it's like legit. And I was like, oh, that's fine, whatever. And we had like the most amazing mystical, crazy day. And part of that, we were very deep into it, where you kind of are nodding in and out of kind of reality and kind of going to space and coming back. And we both nodded off, and we both did this at the same time and kind of woke up. And I go, "Did you just see something?" And he said, "Yeah." And I go, "Was it about me?" And he said, "Yeah." And we had the exact same vision. We had a shared vision, which was, we've come together in every lifetime. So we were together as monkeys, and then we were together as Vikings, and then we were together as Indians, and then we were together this, and then we were together as aliens. Like, we literally come together, and that he's kind of this wounded warrior. I help heal him, and then we go together, and then it happens exactly the same time in every iteration of us being together.
Whoa.
And it was the lock that, like, I thought that we were supposed to be together, but there was some embodied knowing. And again, for people who aren't into psychedelics, this sounds super woo, but there is some embodied knowing that he was my person. Like, in that moment, whatever was going to happen, this was supposed to happen. And there's really never been a moment of doubt since then. You know, and it's been 9 years, and it's just been deeper and better of like, we're supposed to be, we are always together. You are my other person.
I have so many different thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where to start. So, do you know the book, oh my God, what is it called? Souls. I tell everybody about this book. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. Journey of Souls. So I'll just give a quick premise, but basically getting at, like, he says very similar things about these kind of soul groups that continually incarnate together. But he was a psychotherapist who was doing hypnotherapy and past life regression sort of stuff. Well, he was just doing regression hypnotherapy, and it led into past life regression, which, you know, he wrote this book in the 90s, and so you know, he was doing this all like in the 80s and 90s, which is crazy. So eventually a client went into a past life, which kind of blew his mind. And then what started happening, he developed this thing called life between lives. And so a client would go into a past life, and a lot of the process is like, okay, like, what's the next significant thing that happened in that life? And eventually it would be their death experience. But then he would stay with the soul as the soul died, left the body, went into the other side, and basically over 30 years of practice had put all these cases together, and just it all mapped from death to rebirth what the other side was like.
Wow.
I love the book. It's
oh my God,
amazing.
I can't wait to read this.
And you know, a lot of it is just all of the very typical kind of themes of the afterlife that we think about. You know, kind of going through a tunnel, being greeted by loved ones on the other side, doing a life review with kind of our teachers or mentors, so to speak, all these different pieces. But then also kind of on the back end is like choosing a new body and getting clear on what the sort of lessons we're going to work on in the new life is. And with that is like choosing who the parents are going to be, and all of like the really key life figures, like our life partners and that kind of thing. So I already had some sense of that from some spirituality, but that book really like kind of narrowed it in. And I often talk about that with my partner, of like that kind of journey of souls thing. And so okay, that's one piece. Another piece is just about psychedelics, and what I've really gotten out of these conversations is how meaningful experiences on psychedelics can be for people. So there's like a healing component to it, but there's also just this like the rich meaning that it can bring. And there's things like what you experienced, which was this, you know, first of all, just the kind of like shared vision that is very kind of telepathic, where you both separately but together were having the same experience.
Yeah.
And then just how, how substantial of evidence that can be, not for anybody else, but for you subjectively, that the world is not just reductionist.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then that it is also this like, so yeah, it can have just a repercussion on like what reality is and like how this all works, and that, wow, something like that is possible. And then that is just so meaningful in terms of you and who you are and your kind of primary relationship that you're in. And it sounds like this just really concrete knowing of who he is to you, who you are to him. And and then there's an arc here beyond the past 10 years that goes, perhaps millennia, or, just all these other lifetimes.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff is just so substantial.
Yeah, because this is the thing. The next year and a half was really hard. Like he
Between
was
you two?
actively getting divorced. No, yeah, like the stuff with his ex has not been easy.
Yeah.
We waited a year for me to meet the kids. And I had a lot of external people being like, there's no, because if you looked at this dynamic, this is a very classic dynamic, and most of the time the girl gets shattered and left. This is a rebound. He doesn't really want to be in a relationship. He just got to, there's a million reasons why this dynamic typically doesn't work.
Right.
That all makes sense.
Right.
But I had some confidence that I knew him enough, that there was something about us that was real, that I was like, I'm going to just go all in on this and see if this is what I think it is. And it has turned out to be even deeper and richer than I could have imagined it was. But I don't think...
What a courageous moment on your end.
But I don't think... I'm not sure that would have happened if I wouldn't have had that experience. I really deeply believe that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We also had multiple LSD experiences, and all of them were interesting and very good, and got to know each other at a very deep level. But I'm really... There was an embodiment to that precise moment. That's something where my nervous system clicked and was like, you're safe with this person and you're okay. Just every time you freak out, just come back and know that this is supposed to happen and that it's going to happen. And so, I mean, I will say, I don't know that I've ever had blind faith like that in any other relationship. I've always been protective of myself and made sure that I'm in the power position. It really was very vulnerable for me to step into that role, because it comes with a lot. It comes with kids and a very complex ex-wife and, being the partner to a doctor is not great.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But it's been really helpful. And then that also just started us on this trajectory that we deeply have a practice of using psychedelics to stay connected on a regular basis. And it is a core part of why I think we are better than we've ever been at 9 years. We're so connected. We have sex all the time. We communicate great. We parent terrific. We have a bit, we really do have an almost unbelievable I can't believe how good our relationship is, but we both deeply agree that is because of psychedelics. We at least once a quarter are doing solo experiences with the two of us where we're cleaning out and having deep conversations about everything in our lives. And we both find that so connecting. And I don't know that. It's such a suggestion that I give most people. You need to, tools are helpful. These tools are super helpful to stay connected long-term to your partner. You'll need to be able to have these. And right now our favorite combination is MDMA and mushrooms together. it's just such a beautiful mix of those two things, of like open conversations and a lot of creativity and a lot of ways to process. And I don't know, it's just, I don't know. I really am like, I don't know how people do it without them. I mean, but I feel like that in many ways of my life. Like the fact that people aren't open to this makes me so sad, because I'm like, you have no idea how helpful, as somebody who's been clinically depressed most of my life, struggled with SI, the fact that I have completely changed the relationship with my body, know what self-love is. Now, all of that is because of psychedelics. Really, when we opened the ketamine clinic, we had never done ketamine, which is a crazy thing to think about. And so we both...
But also way more standard than it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we both went through a series at the clinic, and I, in my mind, at that point, was doing the best I'd ever been. Like, I'd done a ton of work. I was in therapy. We were doing work together. You know, I was really felt the best. And I was like, this will be interesting. Like, what is ketamine going to do if you're just killing it at life and like your life is awesome? Like, what else is there? And then I did ketamine and I cried. I cried for, after my second infusion, every single day for a week. And that is because ketamine, for me specifically, is a really good drug, because I think it's maybe the best at releasing suppressed emotions. For me. I don't know if it's for everybody, but for me, it feels like it unlocks the trash compactor and like pulls everything just up to the surface so that you can actually, and for that week, it wasn't anything specific. It was decades of grief and sad, everything that I have never allowed myself to feel. It was like, there was just like, come on, you can do it. And then I had a ketamine session where, I think my third or fourth one, I had done all the work around self-love. Like, I knew I needed to be kinder to myself. I'd really worked on that. She was nicer than she used to be.
The voice in your head?
Yes. Yeah. Her name is Kayla. She's a white trash stripper.
Some parts work, huh?
Yeah. That's my parts work. I like her name to be Kayla. With like a heart. Yes, I love IFS. But I made her be kinder. Like, I really had done so much work on like listening to her and be kinder, and worked on that. But I really did not believe that anybody actually felt self-love. Like, I didn't know what that felt like. Like, I did the practices because I knew they were good for you. And like, this is better than to hate yourself.
Right.
But I didn't ever really feel that, and I kind of thought it was a bit of bullshit, to be, if I'm honest. Like, I was like, doesn't it really feel that way, or y'all just all blowing smoke? And I had a ketamine experience where the whole intention was, show me, let me feel it, let me show, like, if this is real, show me. And I had a where it washed through my body.
Just you,
just
loving
me
yourself.
Loving. This is what it feels like, and it was like getting bathed in light. And it, I mean, I won't say got rid of Kayla, but took her down to almost a 0 or a 1. Like, she's pretty much not there. And it completely changed my body dysmorphia. Like, that was the most magical thing that was after I did my initial series. I went in like May to buy bathing suits, which is always a situation. And it was the first time in my whole life I tried on a bathing suit and it didn't fit. And my first thought was, isn't it weird they cut this suit wrong? It's the first time in my life I'd made it about the suit and not about my fucking body. And that is like, what? Like,
and you noticed that,
and the
too,
fact,
huh?
I noticed it in the moment.
Isn't
that interesting that this whole time you've been blaming your body, which is this amazing thing, because some people that don't know you, that aren't really even using a real person, that are using a piece of plastic molded to be a woman to make this weird piece of clothing that has nothing to do with you, that you would make it about you. is a real fascinating thing that you've done
Totally.
for 40 years.
Totally.
That it had anything to do with me.
And I even just think, like, if you took, like, man or woman, like, 15 different people that are the same size for
same weight, or wear the same.
Yeah, like, and I meant wear the same size. And then it's like, well, that piece of clothing is still going to fit completely different because it is just mass produced. It's not like it was cut for any of the 15 of them.
Yeah.
And so, some, like, and if we're all, me and 15 other guys that are the same size, we're all going to be different heights and weights still.
Yeah.
And have different,
hip ratio and like how
Exactly.
long your torso is, like what your boobs look like. I mean, it's like, but it was like this aha moment where it's like, well, that is fascinating. This drug is awesome.
Yeah, and I love that you noticed it in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that my first series healed things that as much work as I had done, I really didn't. I thought that they were going to be with me or something I would have to work through forever. Yeah. And my body dysmorphia, I would say, is 90% different than it ever was from that initial experience, and it stayed that way.
Yeah.
Like I've gone into perimenopause and my body's changed again, and the fact that I'm able to kind of ride this and stay in gratitude for my body this whole time and just be like, you're doing great. You're doing great. You take care of yourself. Your body is just changing, and that's normal. And like, who, kid loves you. He doesn't care. Like, like just be in gratitude and like take care of yourself and love yourself, and everything will be fine. Like.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
a question for you about that. So, I think something that's often talked about with ketamine is like the longitudinal piece. And, is like, do these effects last, etc. So I always find it really interesting because, the way Dr. Dan, the co-founder of Thank You Life, will talk about it is that ketamine has neurological effects and psychological effects. Obviously, they're very interwoven. And I think both can be permanent in a way.
Yeah.
Although the neurological effects can also just be the more like short term.
Yeah.
Which can be still very helpful to, remove people out of their chronic depressed state or chronic just anxiety or whatever. But I think it's so fascinating to hear about particular experiences that felt like it was like a permanent change. And so to hear like, okay, this one experience with ketamine, it was the self-love experience.
Yeah.
And then, your body dysmorphia decreases 90% or basically to zero. And then not only that, I imagine the body dysmorphia in some ways was just a symptom of
the self-love. I mean, it was all the self.
And Kayla, and like how strong Kayla was in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure she's just a symptom of other things.
Yeah.
But it's like, the self-love helped Kayla quiet down.
Yeah.
Which, and then how the body dysmorphia kind of, decreased from that.
Yeah. I mean, I do that really feels like a fundamental change that has never really resurfaced in the way that it was. But I do think, like, for me, how I use ketamine now is I get boosters probably 2 to 3 times a year. And for me now, I'm using them as stress for chronic stress.
Yeah.
And for that, I think it's like the most magical thing that's ever been invented. Like,
agree.
You feel chronically overwhelmed. Like, do you feel overwhelmed? Go get a ketamine session. Your life will feel better the next day, and likely for a few months.
And that's how my sessions typically are, where it feels like the first 20, 30 minutes, I'm just like, releasing the stress that's built up.
Yeah.
That, it's like, it's not my deep stuff. It's just accumulation because life is hard.
Yeah, because life is hard.
And then the rest of the time, once all of that kind of moves through, I usually just have some kind of transpersonal experience, feeling very connected to everything. Very weird
things happening. Yeah. No, I just.
But
that tool for stress, for chronic stress, is just like, and of course, the weird part is I have a clinic, I have access, and I still will wait at least 3 or 4 weeks longer than I should because I got to just really make sure I'm suffering before we let myself go. Everybody that works there's like, Allison, maybe you should book a session. I was like, what are you talking about? Leave me alone. Not really, but a little. They're like, you should just get on a schedule and do it regularly. And I was like, I should, but I will. I'm still working on that. Yeah.
So I think there's been some like real beautiful stuff about like doing it with your partner that you've shared.
Mm-hmm.
I also really appreciate what you've shared about what has actually happened in the experiences, because I love just illuminating that for folks. It seemed like there was just a giant transformation coming back to Texas and getting like that whole point where it sounds like you came back here and you found Ken. And you were kind of on a healing path before that, but it sounds like the relationship with Ken just took it to a whole different level. And it seems like a lot of the psychedelic experiences that were really powerful for you were with him and doing it with him. Is that right?
That is right. No, that's right. Like, I would say the biggest, most transformative psychedelic experience I've had has always been with him. And then doing my own work in the clinic, obviously. But But yeah, kind of those big peak,
two main.
Yeah, those big peak experiences. And then, so we met 2016. And so then, we slowly incorporated our lives together, and then he started reading about ketamine in like 2017 in his anesthesia journals, and for ketamine, for
off-label mental health.
And he was like, "What? What are we doing? What are we doing here? This is interesting, weird." And then ASKP came here for their first conference in 2018.
Wow. It's amazing how relatively new all of this is.
So new. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go to that conference and just see what this is. And I was like, all right, that's weird. Okay. I'd never, never done ketamine.
Yeah.
And he came home and he goes, man, if this works half as well as these studies are showing, he's like, this is going to be like completely change mental health.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. He's like, I think we should open a ketamine clinic. And I was like, what does that mean?
I think my first step there would have been like, I think we should try.
You would think that would be more reasonable. But he was like, I'm not kidding. This is in October. By December, we'd found a building. Like in a month.
Which is where like Illumma is now.
Where Illumma is now.
Wow.
It was a 1980s gyno building. It was like mauve and blue, like splatter paint wallpaper, mauve gyno tables. It was so terrible. And he was like, here's the place. And I was like, you see a vision that I do not currently see. But the other funny part is I had come back to Austin and relaunched my wellness coaching business. And so I had clients, and I was kind of had my own business and was doing that, cooking for people. I was doing all kinds of things, kind of cooking for people, coaching people. And the funny thing about Ken is he's only ever worked in a hospital. So he's run a practice within a hospital, but that is not really a business. That's a different, It's a business, but a different type. And so he's never had to find a client. He never had to market. Like he never had
I was going to say, there's no marketing for hospitals.
No, you just show up and get paid. That's the magic. And so there's a bit of naivete on his part, and I was trying to kind of coach him, where he really thought he could hire a nurse and a front desk person and maybe an infusionist, and they would run it and it would be fine.
Yeah.
And I was helping, I built the website because my background from college was in marketing. I built the website. I did all, helped with branding, and I did a bunch of stuff, but I was still running my business. And then about 3 months in, he came in and was like, so I'm going to need you to quit your business and go run this medical clinic. And I was like, I'm going to just let you know I have no idea how to do that, sir. And I've never had an employee. So I'm not sure. He was like, I believe in you. I was like, you might be delusional. So that's what we did.
So you a couple months later, you found the building.
Yeah, we found the building.
And then he was just like, yeah, let's get a lease.
Let's sign a 5-year lease and pay branding people thousands of dollars to create a company. and like, let's figure out like, how do we file with the state, and like, what do we need to do, and let's set up a DA license.
So how much of that was, it doesn't even sound like that was much of a thing with you.
No, it was with me. I mean, because I got, the other hilarious thing about Ken is he's only worked in a hospital. They still use DOS. He, like, when I met him, could barely use a computer. Like, he has had a career where he's never had to use a computer. He does not know technology. It's like the most crazy thing that's ever happened. And so he's much better now. But when we started, it's still like, when we started, it was like, how do you get on and like file with the state, and how, you know, like, so we were doing all that stuff together.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'll just be this background marketing person and kind of help do stuff, and they'll run, you know.
So what were the conversations like to be like, I mean, I get the like vision and the like kind of desire to do something like that, but how does it go from that to like, oh, like, we're going to do this. I'm going to go build the website, and we're going to put the money into this. I think
we were both just being like really deluded. I mean, we did some back of the napkin calculations of how much money we thought we could make, which were way off. Way off. And we thought we could make a considerable amount of money, and maybe we could build it up till Ken could come over, from the hospital.
And that it kind of aligned with y'all's you were like, cool, this will help people. It'll help people.
Yeah. We both really wanted, we both deeply believed that there needed to be alternatives for mental health. Yeah. You know, both of us had felt like we'd gotten filled by kind of standard mental health, that nothing had really worked.
Was it considered a psychedelic? Because I mean, it's not technically a psychedelic, but was it in y'all's mind at that time? Was it like, oh, this is like basically a version of psychedelic therapy?
Yes, and that's what he was like. I think this is how we get, because both of us had seen so much help with psychedelics that he was like, this is how we get into psychedelics now legally.
Yeah.
Okay, and we could do it. And then so he was like, then maybe other things will come, and then we'll be able, this will be a cool thing, and we'll have a business, and we can work together, and you're into coaching, and that felt like what's the difference? You're kind of life coaching people anyway. You know, like that seems similar. Totally. And then when I took the business side on, that
big learning for you.
A giant slap in my face. Yeah, it was.
How's that been?
It's been the hardest thing I've ever done, besides having kids.
Wow.
I think having the two boys and having the company have been the two biggest growth things in my life. Like, have caused the most growth of anything I've ever done. And the business is one of them. And
those both sound reasonable.
Yeah, it's been very, very hard, to be honest with you, because a lot of that job is me doing things that I'm naturally not good at and naturally not inclined to do. Yeah. So I feel like most of my day is spent working outside of my genius zone in things that are naturally not giving me more energy, but feel very draining. Yeah. That has gotten considerably better in the last 1.5 to 2 years, because I finally have built a team where I feel like the team is on my side. But that took me years to figure out how to. I'd never had an employee. I'd only worked for myself my entire life, basically. Yeah. Like, alone. I mean, I worked in a gym for a long time, but I worked under, we were all independent contractors, but we all worked together. Mm-hmm. So I just really never had to deal with like team dynamics or how do you create a team. And there's been so much, a lot of stuff I'm super grateful for that I, didn't know about myself, how people interpret what I'm doing.
Sure.
I had a really interesting feedback session with one person. As an Enneagram 7, my core foundation is freedom. Like, that's the biggest thing that people can give me, is my belief, at least, that I'm free to do whatever I want. And so my gift to my employees, in my mind, was that I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm going to you're an adult. I trust and believe that you know what you're doing. I actually don't know what you're doing because you're a clinician. And so I literally can't help you. I don't know what you're supposed to do, like within reason. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, I would give people just do it the best way you think to do it. So there wasn't a lot of process and policy and all of that. And then Ken also actually is really big on clinicians acting independently. Like he was like, I need to trust that you're going to make the right clinical decisions.
And that's something that Laura, one of your clinicians, has said that she really likes, that, you know, she has the freedom at Illumma to really do what she wants.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do still have that. But the feedback I got on an exit interview was,
there needs to be more structure.
What you think is coming as freedom looks like you don't give a shit.
Ooh.
And she was like, but she was a paramedic. And she goes, we are people who like structures and system, and that's what makes us feel safe and confident and to be able to practice. And when you don't give us that, that feels like you don't care what we do, and that makes us feel scared and unsafe.
Right.
And I was like, never thought that.
Yeah, new information.
Point taken. You know, and so now we've built in structures and system and communication and plans and flows and things, and everything has a thing. And
nice.
And so for those people, it feels very safe. And, you know, but that was, again, like, I didn't know that. I had no idea. But we've had all kinds of, you know, managing people, you have crazy situations happen.
And yeah, I can appreciate the kind of the balance, and on the more medical side, it makes sense that structure and consistency is good.
Completely.
And then on Laura's end as a psychotherapist, I also get the like, it's like we want a container, but we also really want space to move in that container.
Yeah, we want our therapists to do what they're best at.
Yeah.
And I deeply trust that we've hired people that do that. And we want people to be different, like, because we want to be able to tailor who's coming to you based on what you're really good at.
Yeah.
And so to have some base structure, but also to be able to be like, yes, there's an Illumma way, but the Illumma way is really good therapy in this kind of container with a bunch of different therapists that actually work in completely different modalities. Like Jordan is much different than Laura in certain ways, but actually they seem the same level of acuity of patients because they both are really good at boundaries, you know, but Megan is more of a mom, you know, like we have different therapists that just have completely different vibes.
Yeah.
You know, and we know them, so it's like we can pair people well. Yeah, but the business side has been really hard. I think like most entrepreneurs, I think if you knew how hard it would be, would you have ever done it? And the answer is probably no, to be honest. It's been the most stressful thing I've ever done.
I can relate with Thank You Life in a lot of ways. And, you know, I have a lot of 7, but also a lot of 3 Enneagram.
Yeah.
But I think it's a much different situation because I'm not working with, you know, EMS paramedic sort of people with those backgrounds. It's more just like more of a business environment. But that is, I'm just like noticing now that is very much my kind of game plan with, for the most part. And I'm beginning to bring more structure that I think is helpful. But basically at first I'm like, yeah, you're an adult, you're super competent. That's why we hired you. And
do your job.
Yeah, like
leave me out of it.
Let's talk about the things that we need to talk about. But also like, I don't want to micromanage.
Yeah.
Do your thing, and I trust you. And I think a lot of those messages are great. But yeah, I think for anything, it's finding the right balance for the particular situation.
Completely.
And yeah, I know how much I appreciate just being told what to do or the direction to go in certain moments, in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
But then also appreciate the kind of freedom.
Yeah. It's been a real interesting. Again, it's the best it's ever been. I just think the industry is really hard right now.
Yeah.
Like the Matthew Perry situation did not help us at all. The rise of at home did not help us at all. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of ketamine clinics in Austin. When we started, there was 3. There's at least 15. You know, like that's hard. But, you know, we just keep chugging along.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about the state of the industry?
Oh, all kinds of things. This is actually one of my soapboxes. Yeah, I think
the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think it's a little different now that MDMA is not coming through, but a big guiding thing that is really important is no matter if ketamine is not your thing and you don't believe it's a psychedelic and it's not, this is the model in which all of the things that you deeply love as psychedelics will eventually go into at this point.
Yeah.
Unless you're in Oregon, unless you're in Colorado, unless something else is happening, they're going to go into some kind of clinical medical model. That is currently how we're set up. And if we do not figure out how to make this model profitable for clinics, for providers, for therapists, and accessible for humans.
Right.
Like all of
those are very interlinked.
All of those things together. And if we can't figure out that model, everything will fail, or it will become elitism, which is likely, or it will go straight into nonprofit models, which are like universities and study models.
Right.
Where they don't need to worry about what they're charging. They're not charging people. You know, like it's a whole different model.
They got the funding.
They got the funding. It's just doing the study. Yeah. And so if we don't figure out, I mean, the industry is failing. I mean, the industry in general is nobody is making money. Nobody that has an independent clinic that is not backed by VC is making any money right now. Most places are losing money. And what they decide to do, some in that circumstance, is cut the level of care that they're doing. Right. So they're taking clinicians out of the room, they're putting in video cameras, they're doing at home, they're doing lozenges. I mean, they're doing everything to cut the care back as opposed to like, let's figure out a model that makes sense. And they're doing that because access is outrageous. Like, we have never made money. We've barely broken even or been in the negative for the last 6 years. That being said, we're at the top of the market in Austin. I mean, we charge, towards the top of the market, but we do that because I deeply believe that this work needs to be done by established, highly trained therapists. Yeah. Because when people come in and trust us with their consciousness, we have to act as if we know that, which is not light. Yeah. Like, that's not easy. We skew very heavy mental health. We have multiple suicide attempts, days in hospital. This is not... We do have many clients that are struggling with normal anxiety and depression, but we also have personality disorders and bipolar and polypharmacy and real complex trauma. Yep. That's not light work. And so I can't hire an associate and pay them $40 an hour so I can charge less, because that's not ethical to me.
Or charge the same, but have a higher margin.
I can't. Yeah, I need to pay. I mean, I need to pay our therapist $150 plus an hour. Yeah. Because that's what, and that's even.
Which is also great because they really do deserve that.
100%. And most of our therapists in their private practice are making more than they're making at Illumma because they want to do this work and they're actually taking a pay cut to work for us.
Right. Right.
Because they find it so deeply helpful for people. And so it's like, y'all actually deserve to make more money. Like,
right.
They're making $250 in their private practice and they're making $125 at my clinic. And it's like, but she's taking a day off of work so she can come work for us to see clients.
To make basically half.
Half.
Yeah.
And that's fucked.
Yeah,
it's just so the model is just not, we haven't figured, and part of that is the insurance issue. Yeah. Because, but the other problem is nobody takes insurance because, everybody knows the insurance problem. I mean, the reimbursements make no sense. And that was always my big question with MDMA, is they kept saying it was going to get covered. And I was like, by who and how much? Because they're not going to pay therapists $200 an hour, which they deserve to be making.
For 8 hours.
For 8 hours, which they deserve to be making. Because I'll tell you, you go sit in a room for 8 hours and try to hold space. That is no joke.
Yeah.
Especially with somebody who's deeply traumatized.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go into the bathroom, who's eating lunch? Like, how are we even doing this feasibly? So, I mean, that's my thing with the industry, is I think that I don't see enough conversations. There weren't conversations at MAPS. There's not conversations at ASKP. Nobody's having the conversation of what is the model? Let's look at the economic model. Let's all open our books. who's making money and how are y'all doing this and I mean, the whole insurance thing. There's ketamine clinics saying they take insurance. How's that possible? The ASKP says we're not allowed to do it. Y'all say you're taking insurance and processing insurance. How are y'all doing that? Oh, and then it came out, oh, they're actually committing insurance fraud. That's why everybody stopped taking insurance. Okay, well, nobody tells anybody that. Yeah. Or they're doing bait and switch and they're doing Spravato. They're telling people they're doing ketamine, which ketamine is a form of Spravato is a form of ketamine. But, and so it really is us looking at, I mean, as a business now, we're making big decisions on like, how do we expand our verticals? Because right now we have ketamine for mental health and we don't really do anything else. And so very high acquisition costs for clients. And then they're with us relatively short-lived, although boosters, do continue. But how do we bring in med management and weaning, which is something we're super passionate about. Most people are getting psych meds from their GPs. Nobody's really managing them. Most people feel better after ketamine and would like to wean off, but weaning off of mental health medications is really important.
There's no, that's just not integrated at all for them. They go see you guys, but the whole med management is
completely separate. And we will, if they're working with psychiatrists, we'll talk to and we'll do collaborative care. But their GP doesn't even know why they're on. I mean, sometimes, we have people on 7 meds and the person has no idea what they're on and why. And you're just like, well, and they're like, oh, I don't know. My doctor just told me I should take this SSRI and this SSRI. And now I'm on an antipsychotic, but now I'm sleepy. So then they put me on Adderall, but then I'm 2 up. So then they gave me Vyvanse. And I'm like, wait, what is happening? Then you feel crazy. I mean, I'm not sure what's happening in your brain.
Like,
but
surprise.
And how do you wean that off in a way that is okay for, weaning off meds is super hard.
Yeah.
And doing it well is a challenge. And so right now we refer out to all that. So it's like we're trying to bring stuff in. We're trying to kind of look at how do we have a wider offering, But how do you have the highest level of ethical care, pay everybody, and be financially viable? We are still working on, and have any kind of access.
Yeah, I've seen some really, just in my mind, some really beautiful models, but it's not capitalistic.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get that we could have a really beautiful society where the kind of crux of the society is about nervous system regulation and, globally healing the trauma of humanity. In theory, I get that we could structure ourselves around that, but how to go from what we have to that, or how to insert that into the society that we have is, I have not gotten there yet.
Yeah. We need to do more drugs and think about that.
TBD.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we really kind of always, when we started the clinic, we're thinking about kind of the Cuban health model, which is in every neighborhood there are health centers, and they're basically a hub of the whole community, and they offer a myriad of services, from doctors to healthy eating to they offer kind of this whole, and how do you create a mental health clinic that is a hub of the community is a model that we've always been so interested in. But again, where's the link between what we do now and how do you build that and how do you create that and how do you make it accessible? Part of that, is our fund with Thank You Life, which has been amazing, which is something we've talked about from the beginning. How we do have so many clients that are financially able to pay for their treatment and don't think twice about it.
Right.
And so how do we get those people to pay it forward? And everybody's been so excited about it, because once your life is changed by psychedelics, it's hard to not want. It's one of the first things that people say after their first session is, everybody needs to do this. I mean, and anybody who's been with people who do psychedelics for the first time, that is, how come everybody can't do this?
Yeah. And
everybody can't do it because our stupid capitalist medical model has made it inaccessible for people. And that is a travesty. And so how do we as business owners do that at the same time as paying our people
what they deserve.
What they deserve.
And be able to make money for yourselves, because you also deserve
being
to
viable.
make money.
Yeah. How do we make those models? So we're going to keep working.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And, that's something that a lot of the kind of research that we've been doing the past year at Thank You Life with all the clinics that we work with, including y'all, is around that. And like what can we do to support y'all in making a viable business model?
Yeah.
It's definitely an interest to us. And it's like, I don't know the right solution. Spravato is very interesting, but how that integrates with the kind of current care, I'm not totally clear on.
Yeah. So we're exploring that. We're hopefully going to bring that on at the beginning of next year, because it is an access point. Most people can get it for a copay, which is like, $25. I mean, that's unbelievable. They come for a lot longer. Mm-hmm. So clinic wise, at least cash flow wise, it looks like that will be helpful for the bottom line. Right. And it actually is very getting more people are open-minded to it. I think more physicians are open-minded to it, because it's a pharmaceutical, and it, as opposed to the IV or IM.
And just for context for people, what we're talking about, so Spravato is a nasal spray S-ketamine, which it sounds like basically, and what, Johnson & Johnson. I feel like their parent company is Janssen, which is just all very confusing. But anyway, so Johnson & Johnson developed this, was able to patent S-ketamine, even though the regular ketamine is just a generic drug. And so that's part of the problem here, is that regular ketamine is generic, and so there's no incentives to go study its effects on depression and mental health, because no one's going to make money off of it because it's generic. So,
although currently it's the most studied psychedelic we have. So that's the funny. It's just the studies are not in the way that the FDA wants them to approve, because the FDA is a racket. And Johnson & Johnson said, hey, we got this molecule, and they took it to the FDA and they fast-tracked it and approved it in less than a year. Wow. So the whole point is, it's possible. It's will the FDA, but the FDA won't, because basically Big Pharma controls them and says, if you fix people, and people think this is a conspiracy, but I deeply believe that pharmaceutical companies make money off of us being broken most of the time and us being sick. And if we have modalities and tools that will actually fundamentally heal people, it is 100% against their bottom line.
Yeah.
And so why would you want tools like MDMA, like ketamine, that actually help people when you're making trillions of dollars off the American public by giving them benzos and SSRIs and antipsychotics at a rate that no other country in the world gives people?
And my hope is that we can really get the conflicts of interest out of these government agencies that are supposed to be in charge of our health, but they more seem to be like an arm of an industry to help the industry make more money. And I think that is just really disturbing. And I think a lot more people are becoming more aware of that, which is good.
100%. I do hope that will change, and maybe, because not all the legislation, Massachusetts, I don't think, didn't pass their psychedelic law, but most states have, we're slowly getting around to it. I think Texas is actually, interestingly, weirdly open in some ways, because of our freedom of medication stuff and freedom of practice.
Yeah, so I know there's some interesting things that Logan Davidson and Texans for Greater Mental Health are going to be pushing in this upcoming state legislature, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. So I'm,
it'll mostly be around access for veterans to ketamine, and then also I think for veterans and first responders to studies for MDMA and psilocybin. But I mean, kind of wild that both those things may be happening in Texas.
Yeah, it happened in the last session too, and they pushed through a bill, and there was actually a ketamine rider that we were a part of that was part of that. And then it got all the way through, and then they didn't fund it. So it actually got approved, but then they decided not to fund the ketamine portion. So they're going to bring that portion back through, which is amazing. But in that is when they got the Baylor study set up for veterans. And so that's, you know, again, the veterans are a Trojan horse for psychedelics. Hug a veteran and tell them to be pro psychedelics, because they're the ones that everybody listens to, and they need help.
Yeah, and I think that is what really made the psychedelics issue bipartisan.
100%, because the Republicans will get behind a veteran.
Yeah.
And really, it's a travesty what they've done to our veterans. It's an for somebody who works with veterans and sees the trauma that they've been put through, and then for them to come back and get basically not even no care, but almost negative care, like terrible, horrible experiences through the VA.
Yeah.
And to then not have access to healing is crazy. But that's also why, you know, me and Kevin are currently working on launching a Texas Veterans Program. And I do think that there's models where we can self-fund veterans healing, like long-term healing.
Yeah, you want to share about that for a moment?
Yeah. So we're working on it. It's coming to fruition. We have currently
like 8 sites
throughout the state of Texas, all ketamine clinics, and we're going to be running group veterans programs, so small groups, 3 or 4 groups. It's going to be a 6-month program. It's going to include preparation, medicine sessions, and integration. So a ton of therapy for over 6 months. And so they end up getting, I think, 9 medicine sessions and 9 integration sessions and 2 prep sessions. And we've already run some groups independently at Illumma, and it's just been transformative for people, and people that Thank You Life is actually backed. And so we really are working on, like, what are these models that we can roll out for statewide and maybe get some state veteran funding. And then Dr. Prashad, who's the head of the ASKP, which is our national organization, she's one of the sites in Houston, and she really wants to come up with a model that we can roll out nationally. Amazing. And so, like, that's transformative for people. And it's so crazy. Like, it's $7,500 a veteran for 6 months of care. It's nothing. And it is a fraction of what we spend through the VA for them to be doing worse. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so, like, what does it mean to give kids their dad back? What does it mean to stop alcoholism and to stop abuse in homes, to make veterans go back to work, to make them be productive members of society after they've given so much to our country? Yeah. So, like, this is not about this. This is like generational healing, you know, for generations to come of Texans, and just, it's really important work.
Yeah, like, I noticed some emotion come up in you.
Yeah, I mean, we worked with a lot of veterans, and to watch them suffer to watch everybody suffer is hard, but, like, these were kids. These were kids that we convinced that what we were doing is right, which I also am strongly against what we're doing in a lot of places. And then we sent them there, and then they come back, and then we do nothing for them. And then they're just killing themselves and abusing their wives and coping through drinking and alcohol and destroying families, destroying community. I mean, just blowing up, you know, like blowing themselves up internally, blowing up their families. Like, it's so horrible that we don't think they deserve the care when they get back, you know. It's just heartbreaking to me. And so I'm just deeply passionate about finding solutions specifically for this group of people that have given us the ability to live the lives we live, you know. So even though I don't, you know, agree with our warmongering, but I do deeply believe in helping those who've dedicated their lives to it.
Seems like another soapbox for you.
Yeah.
That piece right there.
Pisses me off.
And so just for some context, it's November 8th. This will likely come out in January.
but yeah, so where we're at in this process, we're just beginning to fundraise for this project,
and we'll still be fundraising when this comes out.
Yes, yes, yeah. So if anybody's interested in this project specifically, or just in helping out Thank You Life or what Illumma's doing, yeah, you can go to thankyoulife.org/donate, and you can, if you want it to be specifically for what Illumma's doing or for the Veteran Project, you can just put that in a little note.
Yeah.
And it seems like a good place to pause.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course, Kevin.
Thank you for tuning in to the Thank You Life podcast. If you would like to get involved with our mission and help more people in need access ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, please consider becoming a monthly supporter. Donations are the sole means through which we provide financial assistance to our beneficiaries, and we currently have close to 1,000 people in need on our waitlist. This work could not happen without our generous supporters, so if you've been touched by hearing these stories of healing and want to make an impact, please consider visiting our website, thankyoulife.org, and becoming a monthly supporter.